Okay, so this afternoon we're going to do a quick video about bees and weather and bees and feeding. So the first we'll talk about bees and weather. So first we'll talk about winter shortly. So in the winter, the bees, 50 degrees is when they start to cluster inside their hive. The bottom two boxes, they start clustering, right? Or one of the boxes. They start clustering to stay warm, right? And to keep the brood warm, to keep the queen warm, of course, like that, okay? The colder it gets, the tighter the cluster is, so then the warmer that they can keep it for them so they don't freeze, right? So then, if you have a really, really cold winter that stays that way, it's better than having a milder winter that goes up and down for obvious reasons, which the obvious reasons are if it starts to get warmer but then going back to cold, it's just like everybody else, right? Even with people. When the temperature starts doing that, you know, it kind of confuses us, right? It confuses the bees. It's like, okay, well, is it warm enough to go outside? Can we go outside? Can we do stuff? But for them, there's nothing to forage, but they don't know that, right? So they're going out, so then that means they're using more energy and they're eating more resources, right? Their resources, and if you feed them, which if you're a beekeeper, you should feed them in the winter, then they're eating that quicker, right? So for bees, for beekeepers who do not feed their bees in the winter, it is known, it's not from me personally, I don't know everything, but you could look it up, just like me and my husband did, and you can hear people talk about it, that most of the bees of beekeepers that they lose is in February and March, at the end of winter, because they don't feed their bees and they have used up all their resources. And that's when the temperature normally starts warming up a little bit and then going back and forth. So the bees need food, but the beekeeper's not feeding them. So what are they going to do? They don't have any food, so they're going to die, unfortunately. So please, if you are a beekeeper and you want to get bees, if you don't have them, please feed them for winter. It just helps them, right? Be nice to your bees. Be kind to your bees, right? Okay. So second of all, now for our bees, now I'm going to talk personally, right, about our bees. We do feed them in the winter. We want to help our bees as much as we can with God's hand in it as well. He is our number one go-to, right, before you research and before you do anything else. But anyway, so our number one tip is to pray to God. Ask God, please, this is what we did. We said, please, if you want our bees to be successful, if this is your will, part of your will for us to have bees to build your kingdom later on, please bless our bees. So last summer, at the end of the summer is when we first got our bees, 3 hives, and now about a year later, we're up to 11 hives. So that is guaranteed God's hand is in our bees. His blessing is upon us, is upon those bees. Crazy, right? So second tip is to research. We did a lot of research before we got the bees and even throughout having bees right now, even up until today. We read a lot about it, you watch other YouTube videos about it. David Burns is the #1 helper. Another person in Louisiana we watch, Jeff, he's really great to watch. And so when you're researching something, bees included, you want to get information from more than one source, right? You want to get more than one source to help you be able to kind of pick out the good parts and then put it together for you to do the best you can do, right? And so number 3 tip is to, actually, you know, I forgot number 3 tip. That's crazy. Well, I'll go back to it if I can remember it. Yeah, okay. You know what? Hold on, give me 1 minute, okay? Hold on. Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, I got my train of thought back. Okay, so number 3 tip from us would be feed and location of your beehives. So let me tell you first about the location of the beehives. So when we first got them last year, we had them out in the pasture, back there. Direct sun in the summertime, which is like, you know, we didn't really think anything of it. We hadn't researched enough, right? We hadn't thought about it. So we were trying to give them shade and doing all this crazy stuff that was harder on us and actually harder on the bees, because last year about this same time, they, in the hot weather, we went out there, and I think we even have pictures of it. So I'll ask my husband to look for these pictures of these bees. But it's called bearding. When the bees come out of the hive, it looks like a beard, right? That's why they call it that. And they're hanging, our bees, they go on the front of the hives. Like, our bees don't really do that right now, and I'll tell you the reason why. This year they're not doing that. But last year, They were seriously over top of the very top to the bottom of the hive and hanging down the hive. Now, because they're hot, right? They're hot. It was too much sun for them, not enough ventilation. They were hot. And when they're hot like that, just hanging out like that, they're not being able to do the work that they need to be doing. So it kind of sets them back a little bit, right? So that's why location. So for us, we moved our bees. And actually, it really worked out funny because we moved our bees in the fall for winter protection. That's what we thought, right? We were like, oh, this is a perfect place. They're pointed south. The barn is behind them where north is, and all the trees are going to protect them. So they're really protected for winter. And then this springtime, we thought to ourselves, okay, should we move our bees back? But we're like, wait a minute, no, this is perfect. Like this is ideal. So for our bees here on our farm, we have the ideal location for them because in the winter they are protected, and in the summer they're going to get the shade and the sun. They're going to get both, which they need sun, but they do need that afternoon shade to not have that direct heat. Because now, as you can tell from our bees, this is proof, this is like 100-degree weather today, they are barely, and I mean barely, even out in front of their hive. So that means they are doing their work, they are busy working, they're not being set back by any means at all, and it's perfect for them. So there you go. So that's why location is important. And second part of my number 3 tip was feeding. So feeding your bees, for us personally, and if you listen to other beekeepers as well on YouTube, and not all of them, but some of them, the more profound and the prominent ones, they will talk about feeding bees as well. Now, hold on one second. Okay, and really quickly before we go to the feeding part of it, I did forget one other quick tip about location and about heat, letting them not get so hot, is that we have screened bottom boards on all of these hives. Now, last year was something we didn't have as well. We didn't think about that. We hadn't researched that part of it to know how that incorporates into keeping the bee cooler. So what that does, it lets them have more ventilation. If you think about it, the bottom of the hive, normally, your normal hive would just be a piece of wood, right? No ventilation. A screen bottom board is like a piece of wire, right, with little squares, and that gives them that ventilation. It helps. It's like you open a window, right, in your house. You open a window for the beehive, and also for our beehives, at the top boxes, they have a little opening that is for ventilation, and they can go in and out of, right? But it also is like having an open window, so you get that cross circulation, cross ventilation in the beehives as well. So now when you look at our bees, because a minute ago I was talking about them not bearding and not being on front of that hive, you would say, well, there's not many bees in that hive, right? Well, first of all, I don't even know how you could say that because look how many boxes are there. But second of all, there are a lot of bees in there. And like I said before, the reason you don't see them is because they are busy doing their work. They're not having to cool themselves off. So right now, a lot of them are still out and about. They're foraging. And then the ones that are inside are being able to do their job. Now, each box has 10 frames, okay? So you can do your math. Like this one with the 2 bottom blue boxes, there's 3 honey supers plus your 2 bottom boxes. So what is that? 5 boxes. 5 times 10 is 50. So you have 50 frames in that hive. And I can tell you from looking, almost all of those frames are covered with bees or babies. And then the bees are on top of the babies taking care of the babies. So that's probably, so just because it doesn't look like a lot, there is a lot of bees in there. And like I said, a lot of them are foraging right now. So then you take that into account. So you're probably talking 50 to 60,000 bees per big hive, which is normal. If you have a strong hive, that is the number that you would want at this time of the year. Because that's what you want, right? Okay, so of course the smaller hives are going to be less. We already talked about that earlier, but they will, by next year, those small hives will be considered big hives here at our farm, and we will have new small hives because that's how it goes, right? Okay, and then really quick too, because people could maybe confuse when I said our small hives, because like I said, I pointed to our biggest hive as far as boxes. But our smallest hive I talked to earlier on another video that we just did yesterday is just 2 boxes, right? But both of those boxes are full of brood, comb, resources, honey, bees. So to us, a small, and that's because of God. I mean, that's His blessing on it. We didn't do anything at all. I mean, we helped them, but you know what I mean. It wasn't. We didn't say, okay, make this right. So because of God's blessings, our smallest hive is a full 2-boxed hive. So that is our smallest. Some people may think a small hive is like only 5 frames or a nucleus, right? Well, to us, a small hive is 2 full boxes. That is 20 frames of bees, brood, babies, eggs, and resources. So, and comb, of course. So, anyways, so that's what we have here. So everybody is nice and cool. Like I said, you can see that they are in the shade right now. And this is something that really, I'm telling you, part shade helps them. Just think about that. I mean, think about it for you or any living creature. How could they be in direct sunlight all the time in August, right? It's just, it wouldn't be healthy. It wouldn't be healthy. And they wouldn't be able to perform to their capacity if they are hot, right? Nobody can, and you're not supposed to, right? So just think about that. You know, think about things like that, and think about when you're going to get something or get bees, get into bees. Just kind of think about things like that, because in the long run, that'll help you to be successful, right, with the bees, which I know that you can be if you want to be. So now back to feeding really quick. So feeding, like I said, well, I don't know if I said anything yet, but I'm going to talk about feeding. So anyways, feeding, we don't, in the summertime, when you have honey supers on there, we do not feed our bees. There is no sense. That would be wasteful time for you and money to feed your bees if they had honey supers on it. Now, the only reason you would have a honey super on your hive is if the 2 bottom boxes were full of honeycomb and babies, right? That means they're ready for that honey super. You would not give them a honey super unless they needed it, right? That would not make sense. Because some people, I'm not saying this, but I'm just saying, maybe some people might think, well, I have a hive of bees, 2 boxes. I want honey this year. So I'm going to give them a honey super because I think the bees know if I put a honey, because it's called a honey super, right? Then they'll make honey up there. But no, how would they know that? They're bees. You don't talk to them. They're not people. And trust me, that would not happen. They will not do that. They're going to just think it's another box for them to make their house, to make a place for babies, to make a place to store resources for themselves. They don't understand that. So please don't do that. Wait until your 2 bottom boxes are filled up, and then you say, okay, now you can start making honey for you, right? For purposes, or you can leave it for them too. But I'm just saying. So definitely, if they have honey supers on them, please don't feed them. Let me tell you what will happen if you do feed them with honey supers. This is something that some people might not know, but if you research it and you talk to prominent beekeepers who have been, and I mean, when I say prominent, I mean people who've been doing it a long time, okay? Okay, and like I said a minute ago, so when I say prominent beekeepers, I mean people who have been doing it for a long time, but also they have to have been doing it successfully for a long time. A person, say you talk to a person who has had bees for 10 years, just say this, right? 10 years. But they told you, but you know what? Every winter, my bees died, and I had to start over every year. So you're going to be like, I don't really know if I would consider that successful, right? That's not successful, actually. That's the opposite of success, right? That's just somebody keep doing the same thing without doing it different to become more successful. But if you talk to somebody who had been doing bees for 10 years or longer, and every year they never had to buy bees again because their bees were expanding and they were splitting their own hives, they were raising their own queens over and over and over and over again, and they were up to say 100 hives at the end of the 10 years, right? That would be successful, okay? And that would be considered prominent, right? You have to earn that title. It's not just given to you, right? So back to the feeding, about not feeding with honey supers on. If you feed the bees the sugar water, right? When they have honey supers on it. Who can guess what the bee would probably do if you were a bee and you had food right above you, or you had to go fly around for food? What would you probably do? I'm going to answer the question, which is to just go the closest spot to get the sugar water that you need to make the honey, which would just be right above you if you're feeding your bees with honey super on it. It just makes the bees lazy, right? Natural, right? So if the bee makes honey from sugar water, would you consider that true honey? No, you wouldn't. A person could do that, right? A person could cook down sugar and water to make a syrup, which in turn they could sell as honey. That would be unethical. That would be not right. That would not be honest. Honey, by definition, must come from natural nectar, pollen, things like, things that the bees get from God's creation, not from human, not from man-made things, right? So please don't feed your bees if you have honey supers on, because they don't need it. They don't need it, and also they're just going to make it into the honey. And so don't fool yourself, please, to think that that's true honey if your bees are doing that. So just make it easier on yourself too. Don't feed them, right? You don't need to feed them. In the summertime, if you have honey supers, let the bees do the work. They will make you delicious honey from God's creation of nectar and pollen that they find on their own, because that's their job. Okay, so now, like I said though, don't forget though, I'm saying don't feed them with honey supers on. Now, for us, we have done, and other people I'm sure, sometimes you might have to feed a hive in the summer if it's a new hive, right? If you split, like this has happened to us multiple times this year, when we had to split our hive, that littler hive that just is starting out with the queen and a few bees, we are going to feed her, or we're going to feed them. They don't have a honey super. They're not trying to make honey. They're trying to build wax, and they're trying to raise babies to expand their hive, right? So yes, it's okay to help them. Please help them to do that, because you want that hive to be successful, and you want them to make it through the winter, okay? So don't expect them to fly the little bit of, because also when you split a hive and you have that small hive, they're not going to have foragers at first. So they will starve. Actually, they will starve to death. You will lose that hive if you don't feed them in the beginning, because they don't have anybody to get them food, right? Now, another tip though, when you split hives, I'll add this really quick, is that give them resources when you split them. Give them honey in their, bee bread, pollen, nectar, honey. Give that on some of the frames in that new split, because then they will have that as well. And then also on top of that, feed them too, please, until they get those 2 boxes done. Once they have those 2 boxes full, they have foragers, they are good to go. Let them go, right? No more food. Here you go, bees. You go have fun and do your job. And they are willing and ready to do that job. So that's about feeding. Now in the winter, so that was summer feeding. Winter feeding, of course, like I have said this, if you watch my bee videos, I almost say this on every video. Please feed your bees in the winter. They need it. It's helpful to them. You are taking care of them, right? For us, and actually for anybody, I suppose unless you lived in the south where it didn't really get cold, I guess you could still feed them that sugar water if it doesn't get cold where you are. But for us, it does get cold in the winter. And so that, of course, that would freeze, right, in your hive. You don't want to give them liquid. So what we do is we give them a candy board. And you could look on my channel. I think I have a video of us doing that last winter, and we were going to put out another video here pretty soon when we make our new candy boards for the year. But if you want the recipe, just put it on YouTube or Google. You can find it, right? Or you can look on my channel too. So anyway, so we make candy boards, and what a candy board is, if you think about it, it's just like a big piece of candy for the bees, right? And for winter, that's good because it's not going to freeze and things like that. And it just goes on the top. It's going to go on the top of all those hives, right underneath the lid. It's going to be a candy board. And in between the lid and the candy is a piece of insulation. The reason you need insulation, and that's helpful to you, is because in the winter, of course, outside's cold, right? Outside temperature's cold. Inside that hive, they're keeping it in the 90s. So it's warm in that, because they need to, right? Well, what happens when you have hot air and cold air meet, you're going to get steam, right? Or like wetness, condensation, right? So if you didn't have the insulation there, it's like you're going to create rain inside your hive, which would get your bees wet, which in turn would freeze them, which would totally destroy your hive. That would be terrible. I mean, I would really hope and pray that that would never happen to anybody, but it probably has happened by accident. Hey, sometimes it's okay. If things happen by accident, don't beat yourself up for it. Crazy things have happened to us. I mean, I'm not even joking you, with bees and with everything else. But don't let it bother you. You can get through it. You can push through it. Don't let it upset you. But I'm just saying, these are tips, right? Listen to tips. Listen to people's experience, so that doesn't have to happen to you, right? So you don't want it to rain inside your hive in the winter to give them that moisture in there, and could potentially freeze them. So that's why you use insulation. That way it keeps that candy board hard, but not too hard. But so then they can eat. Then they can go up there and then they can eat it and bring it down, and they'll be fine. Now the candy board, though, throughout the winter we have to give them more than one. Of course, they eat through it, and then so we check them. We don't check it as often as we would do summer or springtime feeding for small hives, liquid. They eat it slower, but we do still check it. I would say maybe every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks we check it to see how it's how much they've eaten, and then we will do whatever is necessary. Give them more, or we say, oh, they have another week of eating, we'll be good, right? So yeah. So definitely. So my 3 tips for healthy, successful beekeeping would be: number 1, pray to God. Number 1 for everything, of course, talk to God about it. Number 2 is your research of a subject before you start. Bees, this is bees in this case. Research as much as you can. Keep researching, never stop researching, because you can always find out new information. You can learn something new every day. And number 3 would be location and feeding of the bees. Remember, in the summertime, please don't feed them with honey supers on, but please feed them in the winter when they need it the best. Thanks for watching. Bye.